Narrowing the field as we get closer and closer to MLR 2026. In fact, just over 2 months away, the players and the picture of what this upcoming season is going to look like for both the league and fantasy is becoming a little more clear as we narrow down that field and pool of players. On this week's episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, we break down the latest wave of signings as teams approach those final rosters ahead of MLR 2026 and also give up people some nuggets into what fantasy is going to look like this year. The Fantasy Rucker Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Rucker Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Rucker Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 176 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in MLR. With you each and every single week as we count down the weeks closer and closer to MLR 2026. Matt Yee, Devin Vanderpool will hear from just a bit. I am Ryan Yee, and it feels like now that we're back in the groove of things here, Matty, in post-holiday, I guess, mindset here. Every single week, we're coming out with more and more players that are finding their new teams. We're getting a clearer picture on what MLR 2026 is going to look like.
Yep.
And as I said in the teaser and the title of this episode, we are narrowing down the field in terms of how these 6 teams that we're going to see here in MLR 2026 are going to look. So, got a lot to break down this episode, but Maddie, it does feel like we're inching closer here to the start of another campaign of Fantasy MLR.
Does feel like that. You know, we're also at the start of a new start for the Fantasy Rucker Show. The fact that I'm out west and you're basically, I just realized, I was thinking this in my head. You're the lake house mailbox.
I'm the lake house.
Yeah. You know, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, where they put the mail in the mailbox.
No. See, this is where it's going to be. This is the second. And as we continue to go through this episode, we're going to bring Vandy on in just a bit in our Supreme Commissioner Yee's update, where I did make a movie reference there as well. He didn't understand my movie reference there.
And you don't
I'm not getting your movie reference
because
here.
in the lake house they put the mail in and it goes back in the past. You are the mailbox.
Okay.
You are our conduit of communication.
And I am very much looking forward to and I mentioned it in my conversation with Vandy, the broken telephone for you two, where I will be able to pass on a message.
You know what else is exciting, Ryan? Seeing some of these signings come out, seeing some of the boys get signed. I know there's one that I'm excited to talk about today that we're going to get to. And you know what? California Legion has 4 guys on their roster. Congratulations.
You know what? I might even surprise even more, Matt, if you did the math correctly. 5 guys that they're at the time of this recording this podcast. So
and we said we're just over 2 months away, and they got 5 guys in their roster. Incredible. Their training camp must be buzzing with electricity.
We will probably hear more and more, obviously. Like by the time this podcast is released, who knows? We may have 1 or 2 more. But yes, Matt, you alluded to it.
At the rate that they're going at, it's about 2 a week.
2 a week.
So by the season starts, they will have 16 guys.
There you go. Which is just enough. I guess, to field the team here.
That's true.
But like you said, on top of the handful of California, I guess less than a handful of California Legion guys that we'll talk about here in this episode, rounding out the teams, there are a bunch of other signings that other teams are making here to round out their squads. Obviously, last episode we broke down the full announcement of Anthem Rugby Carolina, but a lot of these teams, as we break down the exact total numbers when it comes to how many players each team has announced, we are getting closer and closer, with the exception of the California Legion, to these full teams finally being announced. But we did talk about that with Vandy in terms of yeah, just the excitement here and how this all kind of wraps in a bow when it comes to the impact it'll have on fantasy MLR. So on top of those signings that we'll talk about, Supreme Commissioner Yee's update here, we'll talk about kind of what you need to know here for the upcoming fantasy MLR season as we nail down the final logistical points of what we need to change from a framework standpoint to make fantasy MLR keep on chugging along here. Crazy thing, fifth year that we're doing this, Maddie. Fifth year of fantasy MLR and how much it's changed over that time.
That's a lot of years. That's a lot of change,
Half a
and
decade.
half a decade. That's almost that's a 50th of my life.
A 50th of your life. Wow. I don't know if that speaks to how young or old you are, but either way, a good portion of that spent with contributions here to this fantasy MLR goal. I guess before we get into all of that, though, Maddie, with the wave of everything coming through here, what are your feelings here for MLR 2026 so far, outside of maybe the California Legion
Yeah,
qualms that you may have right now?
I mean, look, I'm excited. Think I think my take is that we're gonna have a league that's even in more parity than last year,
Hmm.
which is crazy to think because last year was a fantastic season outside of Anthem, Carolina, and even then they had their bright spots. But I think this year, I think we're going to see six teams extremely competitive, um, and see some really competitive, close games for sure. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I think what happens with you bring teams down to six, you just concentrate all the talent into these six teams, and I think we're seeing an example of that in the signings.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think really with how competitive the league was last year when we had the amount of teams that we had,
Yeah.
cutting that down in half. And with how some of these rosters are rounding out, which we'll get into here in just a bit, it is looking like it is going to be pretty fun here this season when it comes to the matches that we're going to have. Maybe
Yeah.
less matches, obviously, with the less teams, but again, I think each and every single one, it's going to be so hard to predict. The lines may be on your side of things, Maddie, when we get into some of the TFR betting challenge stuff, might be even a little bit more trickier. But even our
I don't
pick
think so.
segment is going
I'm
to
a
be even
lock.
trickier too.
I'm a bit of a lock, but if the people want to keep seeing how well I do it, what do they got to do, Ryan? What do they
They
got
they
to do?
gotta they gotta listen to you and write down on the sticky notes.
Exactly. Exactly. I was trying to allude to
There
the
you go.
housekeeping items, Ryan, before we got into the news.
All right. Well, hey, if you aren't already, follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers. Handles up above. If you're watching on the YouTube video, down below in the description. If you're listening on the pod, we're just around the corner from Fantasy MLR 2026. Announcements will be coming out in the coming weeks when it comes to how you can participate in the upcoming Fantasy MLR season. If you haven't already, each and every single year, we've had more and more people join this fun platform that we've been doing, as we said, for half a decade, and we're continuing to make it better and better each year. I can honestly say that I think 2026, despite all the turmoil that we had over the course of this offseason, it will be our most interactive, engaging season that we've had so far as we continue to make
Mm.
improvements. So again,
And
you'll find that out at the Fantasy Ruckers. If you are watching on the YouTube video, like, subscribe, all that good stuff coming out with
and
weekly content. Weekly
and
content,
some
yes.
new thing. Comment your early prediction. Who's going to win? You want to hear mine? Seattle. That's my prediction.
Really?
That's my
Okay.
early,
All right.
early,
Coming in
early,
hot.
early prediction. Seattle. I've got two, Ryan. That's two back to back. That's last episode. I said Anthem's going to not finish last.
And you said San Diego is going to finish last, or California, I should
Get the
say.
name right. I said Cal, whatever, Legion's going to finish last, and Anthem's not. And Seattle's going to win it.
So, with the amount of teams that we have, you've essentially predicted half the field. So, I'm pretty sure last episode you've already also said that Anthem will not be making the playoffs. So
I'm
that
back.
means you have.
I come back next week for my second place prediction.
Okay.
And
All
then the
right.
week
All right.
after,
All
you
right.
get
All
my
right.
third
Well, if
place.
Maddie's doing it, then you can do it as well. Let us know. Early predictions. I guess we're already starting that here 2 months ahead. But hey, again, like, subscribe, all that good stuff on the YouTube channel, on the podcast, wherever you are listening. Really appreciate the support there. Subscribe. give us a rating. Really helps us out a long way. Discord community, link down below to join that as well. Main communication platform for our Fantasy MLR season. And again, you can check out thefantasyruckers.com, our official fantasy rugby platform here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show. All right, Maddie, before we get into the news dump and all these signings, we do need to bring Devin Vandy Vanderpool on, who had the pleasure of taking your spot when it comes to the Supreme Commissioner Yee's Fantasy Ruckers League
Dude,
update.
I didn't want it anyways.
Hey Matt, are you sick?
Hear ye,
Yeah, I'm
hear
sick.
ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Hear ye, hear ye, here is Supreme Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers League update, and this time in this new TFR show format, joined by the Devin Vandy Vanderpool. Don't you love that this is the segment that you get to be featured in here, buddy? I know you and Maddie love this so much. And here you are. You come out of the blue, jump scare the people on this podcast here in the Supreme Commissioner Yee's
Woo!
update. You love it,
Yeah,
don't you?
you know what? It's weird without Matt. Usually we band with each other about how the music makes us sick and all the other stuff. So I don't
You're
know. I
see,
don't know how to feel.
it's like you two. I don't know what the
It's like
movie's on the tip
having,
of my tongue.
it's
But
like
you know
coming
when
home
you
from
bring the
work.
two people together close and chaos happens? What
You
what was that
mean,
movie? It was the movie with Will Smith. It's gonna bug me. It's gonna bug me a lot. Um, you don't know what I'm talking about. You don't know
I
what I'm
don't
talking
know, but
about.
you better keep my wife's name out your mouth.
Hancock. Hancock.
Hancock. Oh,
Hancock is the
that's a
one
good
where
movie.
like they had yeah they had like the when the two superheroes come together, chaos happens. That's like you and Maddie. That's basically what happens here. So we had to separate you two, and it took Matthew going out to the West Coast. So here's the newest part of this new format of the TFR show. Again, it's going to be our one-on-one time here with Vandy here every single week, so everyone continues to get their daily dose of Devin Vandy Vanderpool. And this week it is in our TFR Supreme Commissioner Yee's update, and there is a very valid reason in why I have brought Vandy on here for our Supreme Commissioner Yee's update is because if you didn't know, for those of you have been listening and following all the way since the beginning, we're heading into our fifth season of doing this thing. Isn't that crazy, Vandy?
Yeah, yeah, with the least amount of teams.
Yeah, I know, which is pretty bonkers, right? We've been doing this for half a decade, and here we are 5 years later, heading into a year with the least amount of teams. Either way,
Either
I
way.
think if anything, it speaks to the resiliency that not only we as fans have had, as we here on the TFR show have had with the Fantasy Ruckers, and of course, obviously the league has had. But I mean, 5 years of doing Fantasy MLR, man, that's pretty incredible from where we started to where we are today, heading into what I think is going to be our best season yet, with a lot to come here, which is obviously we're going to fill you in here a little bit in the Supreme Commissioner's update. But again, I said it last episode, got a whole bunch of meetings lined up this week to kind of finalize some of the details in terms of what to expect and what we can tell our listeners and fantasy managers out there who are planning to play Fantasy MLR in 2026. But the reason why I bring on Vandy is because he has been our guinea pig since the beginning. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, just like every year, where they hear about this thing called the Fantasy Ruckers, or they hear about that Fantasy MLR is a possibility in Major League Rugby, and they come out and try this thing. And I think each and every single year we've grown more and more and more, and we've had more leagues and more people taking part in it. And I think this is the best time as we reflect on those 5 years and head into this half decade of doing fantasy MLR to kind of reflect on what it's been like here. And I think Vandy's the perfect person to do that. So without further ado, Vandy, let's chat a little bit about kind of your journey when it comes to fantasy MLR. For you, I think I've had a different experience than we've had because rugby has always been a part of myself and Maddie's lives here for as long as we can remember. Fantasy, of course, a big part of that. But for you, man, you learned the sport through this game. So, what has it been like over the past 5 years to, I guess, tackle a fantasy game that you obviously love in a sport that you had no idea what it was all about half a decade ago?
I mean, it's crazy. As Ryan said, basically, when Ryan birthed the idea of this podcast, I was told to not watch any rugby. The few rugby games I did watch, they pretty much always involved the New Zealand All Blacks, and I watched it intensely for the haka only. And then after that, then it was just trying to figure out what the hell I'm watching. But I, as The beautiful part, I guess, about fantasy is it marries the best spots of the sport. You need the tries to win the week. So you're watching. How do I put this? To me, fantasy and sport, they go hand in hand. And if
Yeah,
if I were to tell somebody, I know this sounds crazy, and maybe it is crazy, and maybe that's just somebody who watches too many damn sports. But if I were to find a new sport, I would say, screw it, throw me into fantasy, because I feel like for me, that's the best way to learn the new sport. It
yeah,
is because it's all encompassing. It's like I didn't want to miss a game because I don't know who the hell I'm watching on that team, so I need to figure out who the hell I'm watching. And then are they? I mean, in the MLR, even they're going to be there next week, but and that's what kept up with it. So I mean, and then we started adding other metrics, and I just think for me, fantasy sport, I started watching football purely because of fantasy. I
yeah,
started watching rugby purely because of fantasy, and now I catch myself watching rugby games when there's no fantasy. I watch football games when there's no fantasy, but the I feel like the best introduction is that, and that's what it was for me. I mean. Figuring out rugby, I will say I had a brutal first season because I had to figure out the sport
learning curve.
and the learning curve was tough, especially with the lack. I'm used to two North American sports in football and hockey, and the amount of information you can find on any player you choose is insane. So, I mean, to come over to rugby and not get that, yeah, it was almost like nostalgia for like people who played like old fantasy when you didn't have
Yeah.
the info and you had to check this. And I don't know, man. Like for me, it's just
Well,
that's what
it's
makes it
funny.
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mention that because talk about just a perfect vehicle in terms of, and obviously we're biased here on the
Sure,
podcast
sure.
that is centered around fantasy sports, particularly fantasy MLR, but talk about and the vehicle in which we can use to kind of grow the sport, which the MLR is trying to do. And you're a perfect example of
Well,
that.
and then for rugby too, not to cut you off there, Rye, but for rugby, the beautiful part of it is it lets you figure out individual players. Rugby,
Mm,
it does a great job. The broadcast does a great job of they never make it individualistic. And football falls into that where it's so wrapped up with fantasy that all of a sudden you don't even hear about,
yeah.
football is one of the biggest sports ever. There's very few people that can walk up to an O lineman on the street and know who he is.
Yeah.
Rugby
Yeah.
does a
Well,
really good job of making it a team game when fantasy makes it the selfish part. You get to watch, whatever team you're watching, and you could be selfish. I have the fly half for this team, and then that's what makes it great because a lot of the time people feel like, okay, now that I'm watching a sport, I have to invest myself. How do I invest myself? I pick a team. Well, that's
yeah.
the beauty part about fantasy, boys. You don't pick a team. You pick
No.
players, and the team comes to you. Unless
There
you,
you
you
go.
know, unless
Well,
you get
I
it
mean,
voted on social media. But
talk about though, Vandy, like in terms of how that could be so beneficial for MLR particularly, because I mean, you mentioned it. We started this segment with that, how we now have six teams, and the teams that we were rooting for last year, half of them aren't around anymore. And you, being a fan of the Utah Warriors, I should say the
Missy
former
boys,
Utah Warriors. Yeah, sorry to bring it up.
Missy boys.
Yeah, sorry to bring that up, but I mean, talk about fantasy being the perfect vehicle and avenue for
Hmm.
you to kind of be able to keep that passion. Because I get it, right? I get fans out there who invested in a team and were bought into,
Hmm.
whether that was because it was regional, whether that because you had certain ties to an area. Whatever reason you had for picking a team out there, whether it was just drawing a name out of a hat at a certain time, like we gave to Vandy. But with fantasy, yeah, to your point, you start cheering on players, and whatever that player may be suiting up for, you're going to be a fan of them for a long time. I
Hmm.
can imagine that, Vandy, you're going to be quite excited seeing Joel Hodgson being on the New England Free Jacks, for all that he's done for your Utah Warriors and for your fantasy team in the past.
Yes, sir.
Um, and you'll be excited to watch that. So I think it's a big reason why, or big what's the word, like a big avenue with all the change that is going on in the league, and with the uncertainty of, okay, is this team going to be around,
Yep.
the fatigue, right? Like, is it even worth buying into a team that is not named the Seattle Seawolves or New England Free Jacks because you just don't know whether or not that team's going to exist in a year from now. But hey,
Yep.
if you're fantasy, to your point, the team comes to you and you know what players you're going to be cheering for, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think it just makes you love the sport. It makes you love the sport because you don't have to love a team. You don't have to get bitter about a team being bad. You don't have to be this, that. You don't have to be anxious that your guy got an injury. Well, I mean, you do it in the fantasy sense, but all that kind of goes to bed and you could just watch the sport,
Mm.
and my favorite, I know it sounds crazy because we want everything immediately, but my favorite part about this is the animosity going into you guys marking down the scores. You're watching it, you're like, okay, my guy burned some meters. Okay, no, he got to try, but damn, I'm all over the field, and I know Frank Lahore's got me like at least 10 like, and you start doing the math, and then it comes to fruition, and I don't know.
I mean, we've all done it before, right? Like any fantasy sport. Like how many Sundays, Vandy, have we found ourselves with
Oh,
football, particularly just like hitting the phone, the refresh over and over and over again, and your wide receiver gets a catch, and you're like, oh, there's 1.5 that gets me
yeah,
that much
man, and it's
closer, right? Like
silly.
the
Watch the damn
experience.
game.
I know. It and adds a whole nother level of stress, which is just part of the game, I guess. But either way, I think in a nutshell, what I think we can both agree on is that it takes what is probably a very daunting thing. I
Mhm.
think everyone's busy in their lives.
Yep.
Everyone to learn a brand new sport, especially one that is not a core four sport, one that's pretty niche that we can say, and say, hey, here's this game, fall in love with it. Right?
Yeah.
How many people are going to be like, yeah, no, you know what? Yeah, let's
Yeah.
take a
Oh, because you said so,
80
sure.
minutes of my day and just sit down and try to understand what's going on. And I get the league tries to do their best in explaining, the things, and maybe with, for lack of better terms, dumbing down the broadcast a little bit. Like if you watch an MLR game and the way that they broadcast that from a play-by-play perspective versus what you're watching at the World Cup or overseas in Six Nations or Rugby Championship, like it's different, right? You're lending itself to a different audience, but fantasy is a great way to do that. It gives you it in nice bite-sized pieces,
Hmm.
right? You don't need to understand the game in totality, right? You just
Exactly.
start to watch and you buy in and it makes it fun. Which leads me to my final question for you, Vandy, before we get into what we can expect this year, which will bring it full circle and why you are particularly in this week's Supreme Commissioner's Ease update is, I guess then, what's the biggest piece of advice that you have as someone who started fresh in this sport 5 years ago, bought into this fantasy thing, and 5 years later, I would say, and the commenters on all our videos, when you go off on a certain tangent on a player or you break down some play, like it's impressive, man, what you've been able to learn in 5 years. What's your advice for people that are going to try fantasy MLR this year? And that's going to be a wide range of people with wide backgrounds, right? You're going to have people that have never watched rugby before that are going to try fantasy MLR, that are going to get into MLR like yourself. There's going to be people who have played rugby and know rugby but have never played fantasy before that are going to try this thing, and then you might have a combination of two where there's some people that have dabbled in fantasy, just not fantasy MLR in this style, and know a little bit about rugby, whatever it may be. Vandy, what's your biggest advice for people on the fence? Like I said, maybe daunting to try to tackle it, but if they find themselves, should I join, should I not, what's your kind of message to them?
Well, not maybe it leads into a piece of advice, but right now, I mean, it sounds weird, but it's like it's almost the perfect time. With only six teams, you get such a how do I say this? Such a pinpoint of exactly what you're watching. Where sometimes if you could get on to 15, 20 teams, it feels so saturated. Sometimes it's like it's overwhelming in a sense, where it's like it's going to be easier to join this year, in a league of 10 guys because there's six fly halves, and that sounds stupid, but now you know that not everybody's going to have a good fly half. It's a daunting task when you join something and everybody knows who the good guys are.
Yeah.
Now, there's not necessarily, it's not like I'm saying there's not good guys. What I'm saying is everybody's going to be battling over everything. So then when you hit the draft, you go, okay, everybody just, two fly halves just went in a
Yeah.
position where there's only six. So for me, it's almost like
It's a great time.
it's a great time. It's a great
I,
time. And
I
then
feel
and then
like everything
secondly,
to the daunting theme, like, is just everything. There's a little bit less of everything.
Exactly.
Right. And
Like,
I get it. I get it. Like people probably listening are probably like, oh, that's stupid. Like you're trying to spin a crappy situation into something that's positive. And in a way, yes, do we wish that there were more teams and more players to choose from? Of course, of
100%.
course, of course, of course.
100%.
I don't want to make it sound like that. But I think what I'm understanding, Vandy, from you is like, again, there's only from everything, right? From the number of games, number of teams, number of players, you're going to be able to grasp at it a little bit longer. And hey, hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe we're able to get up to 8 teams in the near future. Okay, here's 2 more teams to add and another
Like,
roster of 25 players to talk about. So, like, I feel like you're going to be able to digest the totality of
mhm.
MLR a little bit easier than trying to keep up. Like, how many times you and me, Vandy, like the hockey season's a perfect example. Football is a great example of this because you have 1 game a week, which is like
Mhm.
MLR.
Yep.
It's easy to digest because you're
Yep.
tuning in same time every week and you
Mhm.
can pinpoint those players and things. MLR this year, because we only have 6 teams, because we have a fewer amount of that. And again, I get it that we're spinning it to a positive light. You're going
Yep.
to be able to just know when those games are happening. There is no weird Wednesday games. There is no
Mhm.
weird times that you don't know is happening. Every single week with the schedule laid out, with the league already publishing out there, we know when it's happening each and every week. Where in like hockey or baseball, trying to keep up with the team or trying to keep up with the league, like I know you play fantasy hockey, I play fantasy hockey
It's
too.
too much.
I've been in baseball, I've been in basketball as well. I forget to set my lineup sometimes. Like
Dude,
today, I was kicking
hockey's too
myself
much. I
because I
play
was
it
like,
every
man.
year.
So I think I get that point exactly with that. So I guess then we'll leave it on this then, Vandy,
Well,
though.
for me to add, I just kind of want to add one caveat.
Yeah,
What I'm really in kind of getting after is you have two kind of things here. You have the draft and you have obviously your waiver pickups. And if anybody's played any fantasy sport, those are going to be it. I have found that the football draft is massive and it's
yeah,
brutal and it's hard and you're drafting on hope and these guys should be getting this and they should be getting that. And rugby is beautiful because it reminds me of hockey, where for an example, I took my first round pick last year and picked Semi Kunatani and I won the whole damn thing. I
yeah,
dropped him a couple weeks after picking him up.
yeah, yeah,
In football, if you drop Christian McCaffrey, you're done. You're
yeah,
done. You do
yeah,
not
yeah.
win. It is over. That
Yeah.
that is
It's
what
a, it's everyone, it's anyone can win this. Anyone can win this. The playing field is so even
it's
when it
wide
comes to that.
open, and that would be, I guess, my piece of advice. Don't get overwhelmed with rugby because there's almost this beautiful tornado of not enough players and not enough information. And if you're that guy that somehow off a whim was like, I don't know, I'm gonna take the third fly half, and then the other two got hurt, and now you're just, I don't know. That
Yeah.
to me,
No.
that's terrible advice, and I do give terrible advice, but also I win. So
No, I
sometimes
get
listen to
it.
shit advice.
In a weird, twisted way, Vandy, it does make sense. Again, the caveat is that, of course, we want more players, more information, more teams. Those are all the things. Like we want to strive to get to the level, obviously, in a dream world to what the NFL is at, right? I understand that's the cream of the crop, and that's what every sport strives to do, especially from a fantasy sense. But in this case, it does make sense there, Vandy, about just hey, it's wide open. Vandy won the
Hey, I'll
championship
finish
last
it
year in
off
his
with
fourth
this.
year.
Live. Don't be scared to friggin' live. And I tell you right now, you are going to play rugby. All right. You're going to sit down on here. You're going to play the damn sport and tell me you don't enjoy it. Tell me
Yeah.
you don't enjoy it because you'd be lying to me.
There you go. You love rugby, Vandy?
I love it. I love it. But I
Did
loved
you
it a
think you'd
lot
be saying
more.
that 5 years
I
ago?
loved it a lot more when Utah was a team, but I love it. I love it. I love the war of attrition that it is. I love it.
There we go. All right, last thing on piece of note because I am going to ask Maddie this question at the tail end of our part of this show, and I'm very looking forward to the way that we have this set up. The fact that I can play broken telephone with you two makes me feel like I have a lot of power here moving forward. I'm going to ask him the question with all these signings coming out that we're going to break down here in just a second in terms of the recent wave that's happened over the course of the past week. Who at this point in time would you draft with the number one overall pick? I can give you some names. Um, there's your kind of
Joel
different
Hodgson.
routes you can take. There's your Davy Kutzers, your Joel Hodgsons. Did you say Joel Hodgson?
I said Joel Hodgson, yes.
That's a name I think that's going to come up, and it'll be interesting to see if Matthew says the exact same thing.
I'm
But
unbelievably biased in that sense because
sure, it makes sense
I
though.
take fly halves early
Yeah.
every year except for last, and that didn't pan out. So
And again, I am going to caveat that and put an asterisk on there and say that there are changes coming to the format of Fantasy MLR here, obviously needed because of the
yep.
reduction in teams and the reduction in number of players. So some of the how do I want to put this? Some of the position stuff and everything may be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. But either way, though, good players are good players, and they're going to make an impact here in the fantasy landscape, regardless of how the scoring shakes out or how the eligibility shake out. So again, stay tuned with that. Again, this is your place here on the TFR show on the Supreme Commissioner Yee's league update to be first in the know when and how and what those changes are, and then when and how you are going to sign up here for Fantasy MLR in 2026. Take those words from Vandy. If
Take
there's
the
any
leap.
advice that you can take from all of that, join it. You're going to love it.
Take the leap.
Vandy, any message you want me to tell Maddie before we
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. Come live with me, Maddie, and Ryan in the gray. In the gray.
There you go. And if you're wondering what Vandy means there, go check out last episode where we have a fun little quiz there for some of the new faces on new teams here coming up in MLR 2026. All right, Vandy. Well, great to catch up with you, man. Time to head back out to Maddie here as we update everyone with the latest signings from across the league. All right, appreciate Vandy hopping on there and joining me on the Supreme Commissioner Yee's update. Like I said,
Thank goodness, better him than
it
me.
was clear. It was clear though, Maddie, that Vandy does miss you. And again, to our second movie reference, the one earlier that I didn't get from you about the whole Sandra Bullock male thing,
The
Keanu
Lake
Reeves thing.
House.
We talked about Hancock, and he didn't know what that was, about how when you and Vandy come closer and closer together, chaos usually ensues.
Hey,
Just like how we
Vandy,
had last
Vandy would love that movie.
just like how we had last season, where we even got comments where I had to somehow explain to you guys the quiz game that you guys did not understand until 4 questions in. Either way, if you didn't check out that last episode, fun, engaging way to how we introduce some of the new players on some new teams there. You can check out episode 175. But like Vandy said, Maddie, the one message he said that he wanted to reiterate is sticking in the gray. And he does a better Scottish accent than me.
In the gray.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah, fun little conversation there with Vandy. Again, keep in tune at the Fantasy Ruckers for the latest on Fantasy MLR. Again, if you haven't tried it, to Vandy's point, just give it a go. And it's a great way to get involved in the sport. The large kind of theme that I talked with Vandy about was just the fact that, yes, 6 teams. Yes, less players. Yes, it's been a hard offseason for MLR, but from a silver lining perspective, easier to digest maybe, and not as daunting for people who are trying to get into rugby, right? So if you're taking on Fantasy MLR as your vehicle to learn rugby and check out a new sport during what is a pretty downtime in the sports world, really you only got baseball going on unless you're a big UFL fan. MLR is a great way to do that as well. Games seem to be happening each and every week at the same exact time. Makes things really, really straightforward this season, and Fantasy MLR will be a big part of that as well. All right, Maddie, let's get into the news.
News dump.
All right, TFR episode 176 news dump here, and there's a whole bunch of signings that we got to talk about here as we start to round out these squads. And like I said, we're narrowing the field to what 2026 is going to look like. Maddie, let me give you a quick rundown of the numbers. Outside of California Legion, who we mentioned at the top of the show, has announced a total of 5 players. We do have a pretty solid list. Anthem Rugby Carolina finalized with their roster of 32. 33 players confirmed on Chicago. 33 on New England, 29 on Old Glory DC, and 22 over there on the Seattle Seawolves, including 2 that are unconfirmed, but mostly confirmed because of social media digging. Either way, some solid numbers there.
And makes it even more disappointing, Ryan.
What, the fact that California's at 5 still?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's start there though, Maddie. The signings since we recorded this pod last that were announced by the California Legion, I would say two pretty big ones, and then a sign of them building for the future as well. We'll start with that. The California Legion signed their first round pick of 2025 back three player Oscar Tracy. He
Hey,
signs with the team.
yeah, have you noticed? I mean, just a general thought, a lot more. This is likely due to all the domestic rules and stuff like that, but a lot more signings or a lot more draft picks are getting signed this year, I feel like.
It does feel like that, which is very, very interesting.
You gotta
It'll be
go,
interesting to
you gotta
it'll
go
be
to
interesting to
NARDB.
see. Hmm?
You gotta go to NARDB
Yeah, it'll be
to make
interesting to
sure.
see how many of these guys actually get legitimate playing time. But we've seen it in
Yeah.
the past, right? Obviously, these top
Yeah.
guys have been good. Obviously, I feel like it depends on situation.
Hmm.
Not sure how much we're going to see of Oscar Tracy on California Legion until we see the rest of the California Legion lineup, as he is a young U.S. eligible Australian winger, 2025 Rudy Schultz Award winner, and was drafted fifth overall. So the capital was there, has represented USA at the Falcons level, and at the U23 level in seven. So has that experience. Right now, we might as well just say it as well. Ryan James is that other back three
Hmm.
player that will be with him. We'll see
Great.
who goes there. But Ryan James, that's a big one
That's
as
a big one.
well. Um, he has been very, very fantasy relevant, obviously. Ryan James on the Legion last season was able to rack up a whole bunch of points, 162.4 over the course of the season, lit it up right at the start, and he was a hot commodity. Four straight games to open the season of double-digit fantasy scoring. Opens up with the barn burner of the performance in that first week with two tries, 63 meters gained, total of 19.7 fantasy points. Kind of tailed off towards the end there, but always had that ability to be explosive. And I think Ryan James will be a centerpiece of this California
Yeah.
Legion offense.
Yeah. And I mean, Ryan, I'm gonna say the last one because I want to get to the
Hmm.
point of Gonzalo Bertranu being the last guy signing for Cal Legion, or the most recent guy signing with Cal Legion, which is an absolutely incredible signing for them. Um, so love to see that. I think what I would want to say to this is that yes, despite they've only had five signings so far or announced signings so far, these guys like the likes of Poitevin, the likes of Ryan James, the likes of Betranu, these are difference makers and these are big fantasy impact guys that are going to be on everyone's roster. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think Betranu and Poitevin, those guys can produce on their own. Ryan James, I think when you mentioned the tail off of his performance last year, really aligned with the tail off of San Diego Legion's performance as well. So hopefully he has another big season. Hopefully he can bounce back.
And with Stephen Hoyles as their coach, I think it is clear what type of team this
Yeah.
California Legion side is trying to build. I think it's going to look a lot more like RFCLA than
I
it is
mean,
going to look like San
hey,
Diego.
there's nobody
We've
better. There's nobody better to run that than Bertrand.
Yes, yes, and
To be leading
Bertranu
that one. Yeah.
Bertranu was our number one fantasy point scoring scrum half last
Yeah.
season. The way that he attacks, the way that he looks for space, the way that he really is a threat as a ball distributor. On top of being a guy that's going to shoot those gaps is pretty incredible. And from a fantasy standpoint, having a guy like that at the scrum half position is so effective.
Mhm.
Again, nothing that's going to necessarily shock you in terms of performances. His high being 17.4 in round six when he scored two tries. But that baseline of just basically getting you 8 to 10 points every single game was just so clutch for you. And
Yeah.
a large part why fantasy managers who ended up taking home a chip had Bertranu on their lineup, and let alone him finishing off as the scrum half one. I did my math wrong though, Maddie. Total players is actually six for the California Legion because we
Wow.
also have to add Joto Fede on
Oh
that
yes.
team as well, who signs as
Another
their first
another
front row player.
class player.
Yeah. Obviously a mainstay of this MLR league for a long time. Has appearances with the Seattle Seawolves, played for NOLA last year, and then obviously now moves over to the California Legion. Your thought on his fantasy impact? Obviously, we've seen the highs of Big Joe before, especially in those Seattle days. NOLA may be a little
Uh,
bit more disappointing from that sense, but
yeah, I
he has the
mean,
talent.
yeah, I mean, look, I forget. I don't know if it was me or you, but one of us definitely put him in our top five. I think it was
Mhm.
probably me. I think I put him expecting big things out of Nola. Um, I think he's still got it in him to have a big year for him and big year fantasy wise. And I don't see why not he could do it on LA as well, or sorry, California Legion as well. So it'll be interesting. I think really for me it depends on what we expect him to play. Like we saw a lot out of Ben Sugars as well, right? So you look at some of these front row guys on LA who had previously on LA and how they did. You look at Ben Strang, you look at Ben Sugars, like these guys did fairly decent. It's something that you can kind of look at and say, okay, this is probably how Taufetti is going to do as well.
Yeah, on Nola split a lot of time with Alex Lopetti,
Yeah.
who had the bulk of the starts there for the Nola Gold. Joe only having three starts last season during the fantasy season, all of the rest coming off of the bench. But the talent has been there, and he's been in the league for a long time, for a reason. So
Yep.
again, with how RFCLA plays, and depending again who California rounds out their roster with, he may be a guy that a lot of people are looking at as a premier front row player here for the upcoming fantasy MLR season. All right. So that rounds out the California Legion side, which a whopping number of now up to six there. Big names though: James
More than one
Bertranu,
hand.
Taufete. It's solid. It's a solid start, I should say, and we'll see how it goes. Does those signings at all change your prediction from last week, Maddie, about the California Legion? He shakes his head in silence. All right. Let's go over now to Old Glory DC. Old Glory DC has kind of the theme of their offseason so far has been really retooling play and building around the players that they already have. Obviously, a whole bunch of returning players: Jason Robertson, Damian Hoyland, and now we can add Connor Buckley to that list as well, who was the mainstay of that scrum half room and who was pretty effective there for Old Glory DC. They also signed Kirby Myhill, who is now a newcomer
Mm,
to that room and will look to maybe be the starting hooker there for Old Glory DC. And then you add as well a 2024 second round pick, a guy that's been around, has had some overseas experience. Aiden Ridgway, scrum half, will join that scrum half room as well to round out that squad. So, what do those do that for you? Obviously, Connor Buckley, a very, very solid player for DC, a guy that's been dependable for them. But I think the big name there, a guy that they don't have filled out as of yet on their roster at the hooker position, Kirby Myhill looks to fill that starting role possibly.
yeah, it'll be really interesting. I mean, we'll start with him. Like, I think, yes, he was the highest scoring front rower on Miami. And yes, I think he got a bulk of the starts. But 55 points overall. It's not anything that you necessarily are super excited about. You want to see, hopefully, he's getting a little bit more playing time this year with Ogor DC. But again, like you said, we'll have to see what they round out that front row room with. To me, I'm more excited about Connor Buckley being back. I really love the way that he plays. I really love his fantasy value. I think he's got a lot of upside um, against the right matchup. He can be really good. Um, and yeah, so I'm happy to see him back, and um, I think he'll get lots of playing time this year. I think he'll get lots
Yeah,
of playing time. Yeah,
12 starts last year. Kind of a lower tier scrum half from a fantasy sense. He can reach that double digit threshold maybe if he's able to score that
yeah,
try. Now he didn't score any tries until rounds 14 and 15, so he hovers around that 3 to 4 point mark with last year's scoring. But again, it's hard to find, like we talked about it last week, Maddie, about these teams, right,
yeah,
relying
and
on getting a solid scrum half duo, right? Like you look at
yeah,
JP Smith and now Andre Warner, right? Like you don't know who's going to be starting on a week to week basis, right? Both of them starting caliber scrum halves in the MLR. And from a fantasy sense, obviously makes that tricky. Obviously, from a depth standpoint, that's great for the Seattle Seawolves, who will be loving that. But from a fantasy manager, it's going to give you
Yeah,
a headache if you aren't able to snag both handcuffs. So having a guy like Connor Buckley, who you know is going to start each and every week, that scrum half room right now, obviously John Lefevre, Connor Buckley, Aiden Ridgway now with that
yeah,
signing of that 2024
yeah,
draft
and
pick. It looks like right now Buckley is the guy like he was
yeah,
last
and
year.
I think fantasy managers will be happy to see that McVay is not coming back to Old Glory DC, because I think Ethan McVay was a guy that was really sharing time with him. So if the scrum half room stays the same, I think you can feel pretty confident in Connor Buckley, and having a scrum half that is the out and out, right? Like out and out starter, that
Mhm.
can be very valuable in this league, especially with the way that we seem that the trend seems to be going around the league.
And we can confirm, right, that Martin Vaca is not returning with Old Glory DC. We talked about
Mm,
that, how he signed with in the Super Rugby Americas. So
mm,
again, Kirby Myhill from that standpoint is going to be a
yeah,
benefactor of that. We haven't heard about Facundo Gaddis, who was the mainstay hooker for Old Glory DC. We'll have to dig in and maybe talk to some sources about the status of him. But Kirby Myhill there, the first hooker, and if that looks to be that way, he should be pretty valuable here for fantasy managers going forward. All right,
yes,
let's
sir.
move on now to the Seattle Seawolves. So the Seattle Seawolves have, outside of obviously the California Legion, have been a little bit lagging behind in terms of the announcements. They have caught up since and are still kind of lagging behind the other teams that have reached the upper threshold of 29 to 30 signings. Again, Seattle's still at the 20 confirmed signings level, but the two that they most recently confirmed is Khaleesi Moley, back row player who was a former Utah Warriors player, pathway player for them, coming over to the Seattle Seawolves, along with friend of the show, Callum Botcher, who the second row Canadian will
Let's
also
go.
be going to the Seattle Seawolves. So you add there now to a back row room of Marno Redalingus, Patty Ryan, who are all brand new to the Seattle Seawolves. You have
Yep.
Khaleesi Moley there. And then now you have Rhino Herbs, Callum Botcher, and Harrison Matile, who are now rounding out that second row engine room there for the Seattle Seawolves as well. Not maybe the shocking signings that we're waiting for here that you talked about, Maddie, about some big names coming through. But again, just MLR vets that find a new place who have been with this league for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, you're filling guys in that are beefing up the engine room, versatile forward. So, yeah, it's kind of like what Seattle has always done. Like their engine room has always been beefy. I think I'm just happy to see Callum Botcher getting a spot, and getting a contract just as knowing the guy. So, great for him. Definitely well deserved. Interesting set. I think Jam Delay posted this or something like at this time this year there's around 10 or 11 Canadians, and last year at this time it was like 40 something or
Yeah,
30
according to
something.
James Dealey, obviously MLR stats, James Dealey, nine Canadian players have officially been announced so far. Last year there was 47
Yeah.
that participated in
So,
MLR 2025.
I mean, it just goes back on some of the conversation we had that we thought, I don't think it'll be that big of an impact. I personally said that. And kind of after having some of these conversations with some of the guys, yeah, it's clear that it's having a much bigger impact than what at least I assume. But regardless, on the flip side, happy to see Botch being one of those 9 players representing Canada in the MLR.
Yeah, and again, an example of that, Cole Keith, one of your buddies, Maddie, New England Free Jack, or I should say now former New England Free Jack. He signs overseas in the championship for with the Doncaster Knights to join Cam Norley Kelameti there, who we announced earlier. So again, just another Canadian that's finding a new home that is outside the MLR, obviously due to the change of rules. But either way, back to Seattle, Callum Botcher and Khaleesi Moley both joining the West Coast team there, the main staple that is the Seattle Seawolves. Now, I just want to ask you before we shift on the other team. You mentioned at the start of this show, Seattle Seawolves. They're your favorite right now. What have you seen out of this stuff that makes you so confident that the Seattle Seawolves, despite announcing the least amount of players so far with their roster outside of the California Legion, but are the most confident with them with who they have on their roster?
Yeah, I mean, like they got a lot of big guys coming back. Like you think about kind of the Davy Kutzer, right? You think about Devon Rousseau is there. You just like you look at some of these like JP Smith is back, Andre Warner is there, right? Like you just look at this team, and along with the type of organization that they have, it just looks like a team that has enough talent that can do it. You know,
Okay.
and to me, I think that matters. I think that matters.
Can't argue with that. All right, let's go on over to the last team that I feel like at some point, like they've been filling out the signing news dump, however you want to call
Mm,
it, all off season long, and that's been Chicago because Chicago continues to make moves,
yep.
and they are up there at the 33 confirmed players mark here so far. So I can't imagine there's too many more coming for the Chicago Hounds, but here they go to round out their roster here this past week. They announced the signing of Wilton Rabolo, the
Hmm.
front row hooker from Houston. They announced the signing of, or I should say, re-signing of Ollie Devoto, center, with Chicago. They announced the signing of their Hounds Academy player, that is Mathis Demendol. Is that how you say it? It's like I don't understand
And
the South
then
African name with the X at the end. I don't know how to go about that. And then also
you and me both.
the signing of Thomas Caceres, second rower
Mm,
from Miami.
we
So
like him.
we do like him.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the two most notable there is probably going to be that we want to talk about from a fantasy sense is Ollie Devoto and Thomas Caceres.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked Caceres last year. I thought he did really like some of the season, or at least to start the season. If I'm remembering correctly, he did really well for that Miami team. Um, if I'm remembering correctly, he's also quite versatile. He can play in the back row. He has had minutes in the back row. He has had minutes in the second row. Um, so yeah, I think that's a great signing for them. Chicago is looking like a very good squad, and yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Devoto signing. Honestly, like I'm glad to see some of these big international guys coming back, and continuing to play for their team, right? So Chicago's another one that I think we have to look out for, and I think like. I feel like as you go through these signings and as we're going through all these teams, like I said to start, it's like this year is going to have the most parity um, across the teams, and I just think that you know it's evident in the type of signings that are happening and the type of players and the type of teams that these guys are having. They're pulling some of the best guys out of these squads that didn't end up making it to the MLR 2026 season.
Chicago now has, with the addition of Wilton Rabolo, has now four hookers or four guys in their front row
Yeah.
room that can play hooker. With
Um,
Theo Furry, obviously the
yeah.
addition there, Jackson Zabirik, Thomas Beckerman, and Wilton Rabolo. Now
and
Beckerman
that's
obviously has
and
played
that's
back
without
row,
any
but
word of Fawcett, right? That's without any
yeah,
knowing
that's
of
true.
where Fawcett's going to be. So, like the assumption is that Fawcett's going to be back in Chicago, but honestly, when you make a point of like there's four guys and they make a big international splash signing, you really wonder where he's going to be, right? You really
Yeah.
wonder where he's going to go. So, signs maybe point to Seattle. Signs maybe point towards another squad, but it's interesting that he hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Now, from that center perspective with Ollie Devoto, if you had to predict, obviously they made the big splash signing at the beginning of the signing period, or I should say eligible signing period with the Tavit Lopetti signing. So now that includes a center room of Tavit Lopetti, Tian Lutz, and Ollie Devoto now. My guess is the starting there is most likely Lopetti and Devoto as of right now. And I think between the two, you would probably want
I
Lopetti
mean,
on your fantasy roster.
I mean,
But I mean, good
there,
problem to have.
I really love Lutz. I really love the way that he plays. I think it'll be interesting. Um, yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how they play that. If correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember Lopetti having experience on the wing as well. But the back three room in Chicago is very good too, right? You got like Noah Brown, you got Videla, like this is this is a solid backline that you're looking at, and when you have to make these types of tough decisions, it's a great problem to have for a team. Maybe not so great when it comes fantasy wise. I think out of the three, I would definitely prioritize Devoto, and then you really got to think about what you're getting between Lopetti and Lutz. But simply with the way that they play, I think Lutz plays more of an inside center, so that kind of overlaps with Devoto. Um, and yeah, plays more inside center, and I like him at inside center anyway. So yeah, I now agree with you, Ryan. I think it is going to be Devoto and Lopetti.
Lopetti. Yeah. I mean, what a
Yeah.
backline though. So you're basically right now with what we have so far for that Chicago team is um, Hilson Beck at fly half,
Yeah.
Lopetti and Devoto at centers,
Yeah.
and some combination of Santiago Videla, Peyton Wall, and Mark O'Keefe.
And Noah
And
Brown.
that still leaves out
Was
Brock
Noah
Webster,
Brown was
Noah
Noah
Brown, and
Brown
Tidwell.
announced? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and Brock Webster, we saw what he can do at 15, right? So um I think Chicago's got a good problem to have, but we've seen this before. We've seen this before
Yep.
from Chicago where we look at their backline and say, wow, like this is a squad, and you never know. You never know.
Yeah. You never know. You never know. All right.
Also, by the way, hold on, before we move on, I was just thinking, Billy Meeks, right?
Yes.
We haven't heard anything on him, eh?
No.
And I would think that if he was returning, he would be one of the first guys to be announced on the California Legion.
You would think.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay.
Interesting. I
Just
mean,
thinking about
in
it.
fairness, though, in fairness, the guys that they have announced are guys that are pretty big names. So I don't know if they're just, again, I don't know what their social media
Not as big
strategy
as
is at
Billy
this point right
Meeks.
now, but if I had to put my money on it and Meeks was still in the league, it's going to be with California, right? Because he has his coffee shop there. He's got all the stuff there. I mean,
Guy doesn't want to travel around the entire state without a home stadium, you know?
yeah, I mean, that's true.
He's
That
got a
is true.
coffee shop to run.
That is true. That is true. So, right now, no centers on California's part so far, but yeah, one of our marquee
You
fantasy
know,
players
they're
still out
missing a
there.
lot of positions, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that brings up a good question though. Like, I'm just looking here. Uh, so if we look at last year's top players, right? The only one that has officially returned in any capacity in our top five is Devon Rousseau. So, I mean, that's going to be interesting, man. Like, it's
I
going to be a
mean,
brand new year. The next one being Joel Hodgson and then Ryan James there in the top 10. So,
yeah, I can't see. I,
Jonah Moe's not coming back. He's overseas now.
yeah, I just have a hard time seeing. I don't know why Mono wouldn't return. Right, like that's my take on it. Is like he's U.S. eligible. There's no reason for him to not be playing in the MLR, and he's had so much success in the MLR. He's clearly not going to Anthem because Anthem already have announced their entire
Hmm.
roster. So you think about all the rooms, and you think Seattle. Is that another Seattle signing that we're waiting for because they could use a back three, they could use a winger, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you look at that. That's interesting though. I mean, there's a lot of guys on there that just are not coming back. And
If you had a guess, so you think if you would bet that Joe Mono would return.
I just can't see why not. Like
Okay.
I don't
Jonah
know
Moe's
where. Yeah.
overseas.
Yeah.
Devon Rousseau's confirmed.
Yeah.
Duncan Matthews, I'd imagine, is probably coming back to the
I would
Seattle
say so. They've
Seahawks.
gotten even more South Africans there. They might as well bring him back.
um, and then we don't know about, obviously, I don't think Brad Wilkins coming back. Or
No.
maybe he's part of the California Legion side of that. We haven't heard anything about Paula Balakana, Billy Meeks, and then again Joel Hodgson, Ryan James to round that out. Ardeo we know is not returning, and then Jordan Trainer we know is now with Anthem Rugby Carolina. So,
Yeah.
I mean, still some guys in that top 10 that we are still waiting to figure out. Now, I
Yeah.
guess that lends itself to the final question of this episode 176 as we again continue to narrow the field on what these teams are going to look like. Most teams above that 30 threshold. Again, Seattle is the second lowest at 20 confirmed players so far at the time of the recording of this podcast. And then the California Legion trailing behind there with 6 so far, with the recent signings that they've had that I'm sure will go up. You know what's going to happen? They've been trickling it out, and then it's going to be like we're going to record this episode, and then a blast of them are going to come out tomorrow or something like
I
that. Or
think
the
Seattle.
following.
I can see Seattle doing that. I think Cal Legion. They're right now. They're trying to put everybody on the edge of their seat, but they don't realize that in between their announcements, people just forget that they exist. You know.
All right. So with us talking and having that conversation about guys that were in our top 10 of fantasy scoring last year that are returning. Good segue into the final question of the show. I asked Vandy this question, and
Uh-oh.
I told him I would ask you the
You
same question,
you tell him
and
my answer next episode, okay?
I'm going to tell you his
The lake
answer
house.
right now. The Lake House. There you
Yeah.
go. Hancock. There you go. Um, what player would
Mm.
you be picking today if you had the first overall pick in Fantasy MLR?
Oh. Oof.
Assuming same scoring as last season, which
Whose
caveat,
career do I want to ruin? Is that what the
right, the
question is?
fantasy Ruckers, fantasy MLR curse, right? Like, I mean, you go back, and for those of you who are listening or watching that aren't aware, the guy that we've drafted or has been the consensus number one overall pick for the past 5 years that we've been doing this, has always been a bust outside of maybe 1 year where, what's his name? Bodine Waka
Mm.
was I think not a bust in that, but he's the one outlier. But yeah, last year was Semi Kunatani didn't do so well, even if it was Jason Potros, obviously the injury there, Ed Fido the year before that. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, Maddie, not saying that this is bestowing the curse on anyone because it's not official. This is just preliminary talks here. So whoever whatever higher being fantasy MLR god that's listening, this is not us saying that this is the number one overall pick. And please do not be putting down any curses. But Maddie, who would you pick? If you need time to think, who do you think Vandy picked as his number one overall pick?
Jordan Trainer.
No.
Joel Hodgson.
Yes.
I don't think it's gonna be a fly half. I think it's man, that's tough. So I'm in between Trainer,
Okay.
Videla,
Okay.
and Kutzer.
Okay.
I'm I mean, look, Trainer's gonna get a lot of opportunity. Like it's not gonna be he's not gonna be as good a team. I'm gonna go Kutzer. I think Kutzer would be the number one draft pick right now. 15 on Seattle. We've seen what Devon Rousseau can do at fullback there. We know that Kutzer can be just as lethal coming out the back. And it's potentially he's going to get time at 10 as well with kicking off the tee. So I'm going to go Davey Kutzer.
Just so dynamic, right? It's like
Just so
his
dynamic.
explosiveness even at the
And
10 position because
and he would have been in the top 10. He would have been top 5 if he didn't get hurt last year.
yeah.
Without a doubt. Like just with the trend that he was on, it was ridiculous the way that he was playing. So I would say that if it comes out that he's listed as a fly half, my feeling gets a little bit worse. But the hope is that he's playing fullback. But you never know, especially if Duncan Matthews is coming back, and even with Devon Rousseau there as well.
Does any forward sniff even the conversation of being picked first overall?
I mean, you got to look at that New England Free Jack back row room and kind of pick one of them, and hopefully one of them get it. Like we talked about it last year, thinking, man, that's a stuffed room. But then Ian Conradi comes in and still ends up being top 20, and one of the higher back rows. I think back row 3 or 4, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. We don't have a guy like Jonah Moe that we can look at, or like a Jed Melvin that we can look at as a staple right now. But I have to say, you probably look at that New England Free Jacks backroom and you think it's pretty tough for one of those guys to not finish in the top 10.
That's true. It's very, very true. I do like that Jordan Trainer conversation, though. I think
would
be just.
I think the only thing that's stopping him from being a top 10 is simply the team that he's on.
Yes,
Like,
but I will say his ceiling goes as high as what this Anthem Rugby Carolina's ceiling is. Like for all we know, with the new signings that they have, right? And let's all admit this is a rebuilt Anthem Rugby Carolina squad,
they
right?
are
Like this
a
is
second last place squad for sure.
So we'll see. We'll see.
I think here's I think what we have to be very careful is just understanding that Utah's backline was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
true.
you know how much space that he gets as a 15 because of the quality of the rest of the backline. It may not be the same when you look at him on the Anthem roster, right? Yes, he can make magic happen, but like remember Jordan Trainer, we also saw him on NOLA. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
we saw him there. He was definitely a meter eater, but he wasn't necessarily as fantasy relevant as he was last year. But I've got fingers crossed. I'm rooting for the guy. I hope that he's able to be a top 5 and bring one Anthem player to the top 5.
Yeah. Again, just early predictions here based on obviously what we've experienced over the course of the past 4, now 5 Fantasy MLR seasons. Lots of changes to come. Like I mentioned with Vandy and the Supreme Commissioner Yee's update, again, based on the changes of the league that we're obviously covering and the league that we are basing this whole fantasy rugby thing on, that is Major League Rugby, with changes there, significant changes heading into this year. There's also going to be significant changes on our end as well, and those will be announced in the coming weeks. And then following that, how to play Fantasy MLR this upcoming year will be not too far after that. Again, a whole bunch of meetings throughout this week, talking with certain folks here, part of the TFR team, outside the TFR team, to finalize how we are going to approach the season. Some things that we can confirm is that week 0, I guess, is what we're going to call it here this year, with the first week there with only the one game that is being played early on between the California Legion and Anthem Rugby Carolina. We are basically calling that week 0, and our official fantasy season going to be starting in what is deemed MLR round 2. And then outside of that, some possible positional changes, point scoring additions.
Me into a Commissioner League update when I wasn't part of the Commissioner League update.
I know, right?
And we didn't need to. I was supposed to be left out of that. And now you're bringing me back into it, and I don't like it. So wrap up the show, Ryan, because we're not doing this Commissioner League update. I want to hear the trumpets again.
Just rehashing it. Should I play it? Did you miss it?
No.
All righty. Well, hey, again, I think we're going to hear a handful of more signings over the course of the couple weeks. It's obviously, especially from the California Legion, but I think a few more also from each team to round out their sides. And we will continue to be up to date here as the TFR show continues to drop each and every Tuesday, every single week through the start of the season. And then obviously when the start of the season begins, we will be going at it full force when it comes to Fantasy MLR. So with that being said, Maddie, any final thoughts for the people, or I should say the message that you want me to send to Vandy now that I am your broken telephone and or the mailbox that you keep on talking about that I've never heard of?
Nothing for the people other than just let's start getting excited. It's right around the corner. It's going to be here. I think things are going to move fast. Next thing you know, we're going to be on week 0. That doesn't count. But then we're going to be on week 1, which is going to count. And you're going to make sure you got the right guys. And you're going to make sure you're listening to make sure that you're drafting the right guys on your squad. And all the league updates here, which I will not be part of because that'll be with Vandy.
No, you don't know. I'm going to keep you on your toes. It was just this week that Vandy got blessed with the Supreme Commissioner Yee's update. And who knows? I might even have to come up with a Vandy-specific drop here soon.
And to Vandy, love you, miss you. Check the mailbox when you get to the lake house.
There you go. All right. Yeah, nothing more to say there. Again, stay on top of all of it at the Fantasy Ruckers. Really appreciate all the support as we head into our 5th season of Fantasy MLR. All right, for Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I am Ryan Yee. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Hancock says, good job.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.